When we travel around to give concerts, we travel with 120 persons. So 40 musicians on stage. I want to touch the hearts of the people. And that's what I wanted to change. So the music is for everybody. Let us try to be nicer to each other. That's what I try to do.
He once said he'd keep playing until he was 140. A bold claim, sure, but nobody doubted him. After all, André Rieu wasn't just a violinist. He was a global phenomenon. The man who turned waltzes into sold-out stadium events. The king of the waltz who built an empire of music, magic, and millions. 80 properties, a 60-piece orchestra, hundreds of concerts every year. His performances felt like fairy tales, complete with castles, carriages, and chandeliers. To the world, he looked unstoppable. But then it happened. Mexico City, March 2024. Altitude above 2,000 meters. The flu hit hard, jet lag crushed him. And in front of 40,000 expecting fans, the unthinkable happened. André Rieu collapsed. His legs shook. His body gave up. For the first time in decades, the show didn't go on. Concerts were cancelled. Fans were sent home. And the man who prided himself on pushing through anything finally whispered the words no one ever thought he'd say. "I don't want a first concert day like this anymore." Was this a fluke or the final curtain? As his son quietly stepped in to take control of the empire, questions started swirling. Behind André's warm smile and glittering stage presence is a story few truly know. A story filled with pain, rejection, rebellion, and a hidden truth about why he really keeps playing. From childhood trauma to industry backlash, from secret songwriters to private breakdowns, this isn't just the story of a musician. This is the story of a man who turned suffering into spectacle and heartbreak into harmony. And now, at 75, with the world watching, he may be preparing to say goodbye. But not before you hear the real story. For years, André Rieu seemed almost superhuman. At an age when most artists slow down or step away from the spotlight, he was still racing across continents, conducting massive concerts, and charming millions with every bowstroke. He didn't just perform music, he lived it, breathed it, built an empire around it. But in March 2024, all of that nearly came crashing down. Mexico City was supposed to be another jewel in his crown, an international tour stop filled with joy, elegance, and magic. Instead, it became a brutal wake-up call. The problems started immediately. Mexico City sits over 2,000 meters above sea level, and André, already fighting off a flu, wasn't ready for what the altitude would do to him. After just 2 shows, he was feverish, dizzy, and completely drained. His legs shook. His breathing was shallow. Members of his orchestra began suffering nosebleeds and headaches, but André's condition was worse. For the first time in his career, he didn't just push through the pain. He couldn't. That night backstage, he made a phone call that would change everything. He called his wife and admitted something he'd never said before. "I don't want a first concert day like this anymore." Those words sent shockwaves through his inner circle. 40,000 fans had bought tickets. Now they were being told the concerts were cancelled. The man known for never missing a performance was going home. It wasn't just a physical collapse. It was a moment of realization. He wasn't invincible. He couldn't keep doing this forever. And for the first time, his massive touring machine, the crews, the logistics, the family business, had to pause. But it was also a quiet turning point. Behind the scenes, André's son Pierre began taking full control. He'd been managing the business for years, but this was different. Now, he wasn't just handling the numbers, he was protecting his father's life. The global tour stopped, the schedules changed, and suddenly, the question no one wanted to ask became impossible to avoid. Was this the beginning of the end? Long before André Rieu was performing for presidents and royalty, before the castles and the sold-out stadiums, he was just a boy growing up in Maastricht, Netherlands. But his childhood wasn't filled with warmth or music in the way most people imagine. Behind closed doors, the Rieu household was strict, cold, and punishingly quiet. His father, a highly respected symphony conductor, ruled the family with discipline, not affection. and his mother, deeply religious and obsessed with academic perfection, left little room for joy. André was the third of 6 children. But instead of feeling part of a loving family, he often felt like a soldier in a musical military camp. There were no bedtime stories, no friends over for playtime, no family jokes at the dinner table. The walls of their home echoed with silence and pressure to perform, to obey, to achieve. Laughter was rare. Hugs were practically non-existent. Even music, which should have been a sanctuary, was treated more like a competition than a comfort. As a child, André came to a heartbreaking conclusion. My parents didn't love me very much. Not a guess. Not a dramatic exaggeration. A belief so deeply rooted that it followed him into adulthood and into years of therapy. He wasn't seeking sympathy. He was searching for understanding. Why did he feel so invisible unless he was perfect? Why was love conditional on achievement? Ironically, the very thing that caused him pain, music, also became his escape. At 5 years old, something unexpected happened. He didn't fall in love with the violin. He fell in love with his violin teacher. She was 18, blonde, graceful, and played like her soul was in the strings. André couldn't take his eyes off her. Not because he understood romance, but because for the first time music became emotional. She didn't just play notes. She made them feel alive. And that changed everything. While other kids were still squeaking out scales, André had already taught himself vibrato, the trembling, soulful technique that gives classical music its heart. Not because someone told him to, because he was watching someone he admired. And in that small crush, something clicked. Music wasn't about being flawless, it was about feeling something. And for a little boy who felt so little at home, that was everything. As André grew older, the cracks in his relationship with his parents turned into deep, unbridgeable divides. His passion for music was undeniable, but his vision for it was completely at odds with his father's. André didn't want to perform rigid symphonies in stiff suits under chandeliers. He wanted music to feel alive, joyful, emotional, unpredictable, and for his father, that wasn't just a disagreement. It was an insult. When André first expressed his desire to play waltzes, those light, lilting dances that made people smile, his father snapped, "I didn't educate you to do waltzes." It wasn't just disappointment. It was rejection. Cold, final, and unforgiving. And it got worse. When André brought home the woman he loved, Marjorie, a brilliant mind and his future wife, he wasn't met with congratulations or kindness. Instead, his mother looked her up and down and told her to leave. Then she turned to André and told him to go clean his room like a misbehaving child. That was the moment. The moment when decades of emotional restraint shattered. He turned his back, walked out with Marjorie, and never looked back. From that day forward, his parents never attended a single one of his concerts. Not when he packed arenas, not when he became a global sensation, not even when millions watched him bring classical music to life in ways no one had ever seen before. His father passed away in 1992, still refusing to acknowledge what André had built, still refusing to say, "I'm proud of you."
Because he was not proud of me. He never said, "I love you." He never said, "I'm proud of you." Never.
And yet, André didn't crumble. He didn't chase their approval. He built something better. While the rejection left scars, it also gave him something powerful, a fire. A deep, unrelenting desire to prove that music didn't have to be cold, elite, or exclusive. He knew what it felt like to be shut out. And he made a silent vow. No one who came to hear his orchestra would ever feel the way he felt growing up, unseen, unloved, unwelcome. So, while others played for critics, André began planning something much more personal, something that would forever change how the world experienced classical music. By 1978, André Rieu was a young father with a newborn at home, barely scraping by. But one thing was clear. He couldn't keep playing someone else's version of music. So, with a few close musicians, he created the Maastricht Salon Orchestra. It was modest, barely paid, and completely off the radar of classical elites. They played waltzes and forgotten salon pieces at weddings, community centers, and small town halls across Belgium and Germany. No tuxedos, no pretense, just music that made people smile. It wasn't glamorous. Sometimes it barely covered the gas. But André didn't care, because for the first time in his life, music felt like freedom. Then, during one small-town performance, something happened. He was playing Franz Lehar's Gold and Silver Waltz. It wasn't a packed hall, it wasn't a flashy venue, but as he poured everything he had into the melody, he felt it. The music pushed back. It felt alive. And in that moment, he made a quiet decision. He didn't care if critics sneered. He didn't care if elites rolled their eyes. He was going to chase that feeling and bring it to as many people as possible. But after nearly a decade with the Salon Orchestra, the spark began to dim. André wanted more than tiny stages and modest applause. He wanted spectacle, joy, color, something bigger. He dreamed of reviving the spirit of Johann Strauss, the 19th century waltz king who once conducted while dancing with his entire body, captivating crowds across Europe. Most people would have dismissed the idea. Bigger meant risk. Hiring more musicians meant bigger bills. And André wasn't rich, not even close. But in his heart, he knew this was the moment. So on January 1st, 1988, he launched a new group, the Johann Strauss Orchestra. Just 12 musicians to start, a modest crowd. But the difference was clear from the very first concert. There were no stiff black suits, no serious faces. Instead, he brought in laughter, bold lighting, spontaneous moments. Classical purists were horrified, critics scoffed. But the audience? They clapped, they smiled, they got up and moved. André had found his spark, and nothing, not tradition, not critics, not even financial risk, was going to make him let it go. May 1995, the Champions League final in Vienna. Ajax versus Bayern Munich. A sea of 50,000 football fans roared in the stands, ready for one of Europe's biggest matches. But at halftime, the energy shifted. Onto the pitch walked a man with a violin and an orchestra behind him. It was André Rieu. And what happened next would change everything, not just for him, but for the future of classical music. They performed Shostakovich's Waltz number du Béonger, a strange choice, some thought, for a sporting event. But within seconds, the crowd stopped shouting. Then, they started swaying, humming, letting the music wash over them. It was surreal. A stadium full of hardcore football fans completely captured by a waltz. Cameras broadcast the performance across Europe, 300 million people watching. And just like that, a violinist took over the halftime show and stole the spotlight from the biggest football clubs on the continent. What followed was an explosion. CD sales skyrocketed. His album Strauss & Company, which had been quietly released a year earlier, suddenly flew off the shelves. Within weeks, he had sold 200,000 copies. In the Netherlands, the album dominated the charts, 19 weeks at #1. It became the best-selling Dutch album of the entire decade. And perhaps most shocking of all, a classical music record was now outselling global pop stars. That halftime performance wasn't just a show, it was a cultural shockwave. People who had never even considered listening to classical music were now buying his CDs, attending his concerts, and falling in love with waltzes. All because one man dared to bring elegance into a place built for chaos. Music critics didn't know what to make of it. Traditionalists were appalled. But something undeniable had happened. André Rieu had cracked the code. He made classical music feel human, emotional, and thrilling. And this wasn't the end of a lucky streak. It was only the beginning of a movement. With every waltz he played, André Rieu drew millions closer and pushed the classical elite further away. As ticket sales soared and stadiums filled, the critics sharpened their knives. They didn't see joy in his performances. They saw betrayal. To them, André wasn't preserving classical music. He was corrupting it. Simplified arrangements, colorful gowns, jokes on stage, massive sets. They called it a circus. One prominent conductor even went so far as to call it musical pornography. But André didn't flinch. He was too busy building something no one had ever attempted in the classical world, an empire of feeling. In 2008, he did the unthinkable. He spent 34 million euros constructing a full-scale replica of Vienna's Schönbrunn Palace, complete with fountains, chandeliers, horses, and ice rinks. And he didn't just build it, he took it on tour. Cities all over the world watched in disbelief as what looked like a royal dream arrived on trucks and was assembled over 6 days by 100 workers. The backlash was instant. Purists were horrified. They said he was turning centuries-old music into a traveling amusement park. But again, the people loved it. Audiences showed up in record numbers. In Melbourne alone, over 38,000 people filled the Telstra Dome. Across 3 nights, nearly 90,000 fans came to watch him perform in Australia, breaking every classical concert record the country had. And the success didn't stop there. His DVDs topped charts. His albums outsold pop giants. At one point in Australia, he held 8 of the top 10 DVD spots, right alongside acts like Pink and AC/DC. Soon, André was rubbing shoulders with the world's top-grossing tour artists: Madonna, The Police, Bon Jovi. Not bad for a guy dismissed by critics as a gimmick. And then came the stats no one could ignore: over 500 platinum awards. Universal Music gave him a custom chrome violin trophy, admitting they'd never seen anything like him. While other orchestras begged for government funding, Rieu was running a self-sustaining juggernaut, fueled by loyalty, not legacy. He wasn't just a musician anymore. He was a movement. And he proved something that scared the old guard the most. You don't need permission to change the rules, just the courage to rewrite them. Behind the dazzling lights and sold-out tours, André Rieu's life hasn't been all fanfare and fairy tales. In 2016, tragedy struck during what was supposed to be one of the most joyful times of the year: his Christmas tour in the UK. The orchestra was staying in Leeds when something devastating happened. Rieu's longtime trombonist, Ruud Merckx, suffered a sudden cardiac arrest in his sleep. He had been with André for over 20 years. His wife, also a violinist in the orchestra, was by his side. And back home, 2 children were waiting for their father to come home. The loss hit like a freight train. André didn't hesitate. He cancelled the Nottingham concert that night, then postponed the rest of the UK tour. London, Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, wiped from the calendar. For most performers, a sudden tour cancellation would be about logistics and damage control. For André, it was family. He wasn't running a company. He was grieving alongside people he had performed beside for decades. And that grief never fully faded. When Rieu returned to the UK in March, fans noticed something different. The magic was still there, but the sparkle had dimmed. And André? He hadn't forgotten. He never would. But emotional pain wasn't the only battle he was quietly fighting. Over the years, his body had begun pushing back. In 2010, a viral infection in his inner ear wrecked his balance, derailing an entire tour and taking months to recover from. In 2019, he performed through a high fever, refusing to let illness ruin a show. He kept going. Always. Because for André, the show had to go on. Until Mexico. That collapse in 2024 wasn't just a health scare. It was a culmination. A body that had been pushed past its limit. A man who had never truly paused, finally forced to. Dizzy, feverish, and exhausted, André admitted something few performers ever dare to say out loud. He couldn't do this forever. For a man who once joked about performing until he was 140, it was the closest he'd come to acknowledging the end. But even in his most fragile moment, André didn't give up. He just shifted, slowed, changed course. Because if he couldn't outrun time, he could at least try to reshape it. While the world saw André Rieu center stage, arms raised, violin in hand, smiling through thunderous applause, what they didn't see was who stood quietly behind the curtain, holding everything together. His empire may carry his name, but its foundation rests on family. And at the heart of it all is Marjorie, his wife, his partner, and the orchestra's secret weapon. To most fans, Marjorie is just the woman beside the maestro. But that's a surface-level view. Behind the scenes, she's been shaping the sound of his orchestra for decades, writing, arranging, and pushing André toward the bold choices that defined his career. She never asked for the spotlight. Her name wasn't printed on album covers, but the music wouldn't exist without her. She was the one who helped him believe that Strauss-style waltzes could survive in the modern world. The one who pushed him to dream bigger, play bolder, and reach for stages no classical artist had ever touched. And then there's Pierre, their son, and now, the protector of the entire operation. What began as helping his father with logistics has evolved into full leadership. After André's collapse, Pierre took control of the business and began redesigning the very way the orchestra functioned. No more punishing travel schedules, no more back-to-back flights across time zones, Europe-only tours, measured pacing. Every decision was made with one goal: keep his father safe while preserving the magic. The family's boldest move came not on a stage, but in a real estate office. While on vacation, they got a call. A portion of a 15th century castle was up for sale. Before André could ask if it was possible, Marjorie said 3 words: "Sell more records." And they did. That castle became their home, their headquarters, their creative sanctuary. André personally oversaw the design, fusing Austrian elegance with Venetian flair, turning cold stone into warm fantasy. Now that legacy is expanding. Their granddaughter Daisy, just 9 years old, is already rehearsing with the orchestra. No cameras, no gimmicks, just music, just family, just the quiet continuation of something that started not with a business plan, but with a boy, a violin, and a dream. Even as André Rieu charmed millions, not every headline about him was wrapped in applause. In 2015, during one of his beloved summer concerts in Maastricht, a controversy erupted, one that had nothing to do with music. 11 children from a Romanian music group joined him on stage, part of an ensemble led by pan-flute legend Gheorghe Zamfir. They waved to the crowd during the curtain call, smiling and soaking in the moment. But Dutch authorities didn't see it as innocent. They claimed the children had performed past the legal working hours for minors and hit André with a jaw-dropping fine: 236,000 euros. It became one of the largest cultural fines in Dutch history. His team fought back, arguing that the children hadn't actually performed past the cutoff. They were simply part of the final bow, and technically under Zamfir's direction, not André's. Still, the case dragged on for nearly 2 years. Eventually, the court sided with him. The fine was thrown out. But the ordeal left a stain. Critics questioned his judgment, and the tabloids had their field day. For a man whose brand was built on joy and elegance, this brush with legal drama was a stark reminder that not everyone celebrated his rise. But just as quickly as headlines tried to bring him down, André's quiet actions spoke louder. In 2019, when a band of mentally disabled musicians had their instruments stolen, he didn't issue a statement or launch a fundraiser. He simply replaced everything, 20,000 euros worth of gear, out of pocket. No press release, no cameras, just kindness. When Notre Dame Cathedral burned, he quietly offered 700 tons of steel to help with the restoration. Again, not for publicity, just because it was the right thing to do. And behind his glittering performances and high-production stages, André was preparing for something most fans didn't know about: financial safety. After a near collapse during a previous economic downturn, he learned a painful truth: dreams are expensive, and fame can vanish. That's when he began quietly investing in real estate. Today, he owns over 80 properties across the Netherlands. Not castles, not palaces, just practical assets that secure the future for his family, his orchestra, and everything they've built. He's been praised, fined, doubted, and adored. But through it all, André Rieu has remained exactly who he set out to be. Not a perfect man, but a sincere one. André Rieu didn't just perform music. He redefined how the world experienced it. While other orchestras clung to centuries-old traditions, Rieu threw open the doors, tore up the rule book, and invited everyone to the party. He didn't believe music should be reserved for the elite, locked behind concert hall etiquette and expensive suits. He wanted emotion, spontaneity, connection. And that's exactly what he created. One waltz at a time. His concerts began to feel more like weddings than recitals. There was laughter, fake snow, sing-alongs, even the occasional spontaneous dance break. Rieu encouraged audiences to clap, cheer, cry, and celebrate. Gone were the stiff rules about when to applaud or how to dress. He told fans not to worry about ball gowns, unless they planned to twirl in them. But it wasn't just what happened on stage that made him revolutionary. It was how he reached people beyond it. While traditional symphonies were still advertising through posters and printed programs, André was already mastering social media. Long before many of his peers even understood how platforms like Facebook or Instagram worked, he was going viral. Performances like Danny Boy in Dublin didn't just entertain concertgoers. They pulled in millions of views online, transforming classical performances into must-watch digital experiences. And it didn't stop there. Each tour stop came with regional flavor. Local songs, culturally tailored themes, and even city-specific giveaways made every audience feel like part of the orchestra. Fans weren't just spectators, they were participants. He held polls, teased set lists, gave sneak peeks, and made sure every concert felt personal. Then came the cinema era. Not content with filling stadiums, Rieu brought his magic to the big screen. But instead of filming a static stage, he crafted full, cinematic experiences. His 2025 film, The Dream Continues, wasn't just a concert, it was a journey. River scenes from his hometown, rare behind-the-scenes footage, childhood memories, it all blended into one seamless, emotional ride. Movie theaters had to change their rules. Audiences were sipping wine, bringing snacks, and clapping mid-performance. Because André wasn't giving them a recital. He was giving them a celebration. While some critics rolled their eyes, business schools started taking notes. Orchestras that once mocked his approach began asking how he did it. Because while they struggled to fill half-empty halls, André was selling out arenas, topping global charts, and redefining success in a genre many believed was dying. He didn't just save classical music, he made it feel human again. Now, at 75, André Rieu stands at a crossroads. His health has shown warning signs. His touring schedule is shrinking. And for the first time in decades, the idea of slowing down no longer feels like a joke. It feels inevitable. But if you ask him about retirement, he just laughs. "I'll perform until I'm 140, he says with a wink. And part of you believes he might actually try. But something has changed. His son Pierre now handles most of the logistics. Tours are limited to Europe. No more punishing travel across time zones. Behind the curtain, the machinery is shifting, adapting. Not to stop André, but to protect him. To make sure the music lives on, even if the man who started it all needs to step back. Still, stepping back doesn't come naturally to him. He's not just attached to his violin, he's bound to the people who stand beside him on stage. When asked what he'd give up first, his instrument or a member of his orchestra, his answer is immediate. The violin can go. The people stay. Because for André, the orchestra isn't just a job, it's his second family. Some of them have been with him for 25 years or more. They've laughed, cried, toured, and mourned together. They're not just musicians, they're part of his soul. And maybe that's why he can't stop. Because to stop playing would mean letting go of everything that helped him heal, the joy that replaced his childhood pain, the connection that filled the void his parents never could, the applause that told him over and over, "You are seen." His upcoming concert series in Maastricht feels different, like a homecoming, like a farewell, though no one dares say it out loud. The music will soar, the crowd will dance, and somewhere in that sea of faces, André will look out and see what he built. Not just a concert, not just an orchestra, but a world where people could feel joy. Together. Maybe he will keep playing. Maybe he won't. But one thing is certain. André Rieu didn't just change classical music. He changed how people feel it. And no matter what happens next, that legacy will never fade.